Hi everyone. Today I wanted to talk about a punctuation mark that doesn't get a whole lot of love, and that is the apostrophe. I had a lot of students who will oftentimes get this word confused with comma, and I know that they look very similar, but an apostrophe is more of like closely related to a quotation mark, or at least one symbol of half of a quotation. Most people would get them confused with commas, even though I think that's just because one is lower, being the comma, and then one is higher up in a sentence, and so that can be like a moment of confusion for people. There are three reasons that apostrophes exist, and so I want to keep the focus on the grammatical reasoning of why apostrophes are used in modern English. The least way people think about commas is how you can form new plurals, or a plural just means more than one. So if someone says, I got A's and B's on all my tests, A's and B's would be represented as capital letters, the apostrophe, and then the S to show that it is plural. But you don't normally do that to make something plural in common nouns in modern English. Another sentence could be like, mind your P's and Q's, or like, mind your manners. And so that idiom also uses the apostrophe to make P's and Q's plural, like there's more than one. And so that's more of like an unknown. Not a lot of people think about that when they think of an apostrophe. They're more likely going to think of the other two being contractions and ways to show ownership and possession. Let's talk about contractions for a second. So this one's always funny because I'll have students and it's like they know what a contraction is. It's when you take two words and squish them together. A more prescriptive way to say that would be it is the omission or getting rid of certain sounds and letters to make a word shorter. And I like them just because it makes the word more efficient. It's faster, it's quicker. So students would think of the word contraction, but then they don't want to say it out loud because contraction is another word. It has dual meaning, and they don't want to say contraction because now they're second guessing themselves, like, no, contraction is this thing that happens with a person having a baby, and I don't want to say that out loud and be wrong. And that leads to a lot of my students looking up on my wall where I have like all these posters of my parts of speech, and they're like, well, I know it's a long C word, and so then they raise their hand and say conjunction, and I'm like, no. And so I've always found that to be funny because that's a pattern I've noticed just teaching for a few years now. But it is a contraction. So using an apostrophe is when you combine two words to make a contraction using that punctuation mark, like don't, D-O-N apostrophe T, or can't, C-A-N apostrophe T. It's just meant to kind of represent some letters or sounds that are no longer present. The most common thing people think of when they think of an apostrophe is showing ownership or possession, but there are some rules and some not rules with that. So if you say like child's laughter, you would still have the word child's, but you're not saying children like more than one child. You mean one. And in that case, you would have C-H-I-L-D apostrophe S. So that apostrophe S is going to show that ownership or show that possession. Now, if you have something that is plural, more than one, like children, and those children are laughing, and I want to reference the laughter of those children, then you would say the children's laughter. But in that case, because the word children is already plural, you would still do the apostrophe S on the end. If you have a name that ends in an S, like Curtis or Thomas, and you might say Thomas's dog or Curtis's game, you have a couple options there, but some people teach it pretty strictly. For example, I typically go like efficient, don't waste my time, get it done. I'm just going to say the name Thomas or Curtis, and I'm just going to add the apostrophe after the S because that could work. And it's still showing ownership, but I'm not trying to make it where there's more than one Curtis, there's not more than one Thomas. But you do have an option there. If you want to write with the apostrophe S, you could still write Thomas apostrophe S or Curtis apostrophe S, and that would still work grammatically, but it's really up to you. Some scholars again kind of argue which way they want to go with that, but then you have other scholars that argue that apostrophes are a waste of time. But I really like them just because it makes things more efficient and quick, and I'm very into the don't waste my time, I don't waste yours kind of mentality as a teacher. That's why I do like apostrophes, and I do appreciate them and what they can do just for like the grammatical structure and efficiency of the language itself. And I hope you guys learned something. Don't be afraid to learn. Bye guys.